Welcome to My Life in Boxing with me, Gareth Davies, and him, Spencer the Omen Oliver. In this series, we will speak to ex-fighters, current fighters, trainers, commentators, ring announcers, and all the characters from the fight world. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
We used to spar in the front room, and 10 times out of 10, he used to give me a beating, and I thought, I'm gonna get him back. I started training properly from when I was 7 years of age.
7 years
of age. Thought I won the fight, and it was a good fight, a close fight, but I thought I'd done enough to win it, and I think most people around at that time did as well. And I lost the gold medal, so I thought I'm turning pro.
You dreamt of being a world champion, you had it all taken away from you.
Yeah. This is something, by the way, that I love in the box, and I only very rarely talk about. It's difficult. And I thought, what else am I going to do with my life? I was going to be the next big thing in boxing. Come down, bam, lights go out. I felt bitter and twisted then.
There you go.
A lot of drinking, a lot of going out.
Did you ever think of taking your own life in that period?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, because I thought, what's it for? Yeah, it's tough. I now recognise that I was given a second shot at life and living a full life, a full, healthy life.
Spence, great to see you.
Good seeing you too, Gareth.
Let's get straight into your life in boxing. How did you get into boxing?
Started many, many years ago. I was a 7-year-old kid, and it didn't actually start in a boxing gym. It started in my front room. Yeah, it's bizarre. So my dad used to go to the pub like most people did at weekends, and he used to come back. I had an older brother, Danny, who was 11 at the time. I was around 7. And he used to come back, and like Dad used to do back then, we'd call the boys up, come down, boys, had a few drinks, and he used to get us sparring. But obviously the age difference, it was like sort of man against boy. It was like an 11-year-old against a 7-year-old. Well, the height difference went up. He's quite small as well.
Glove each?
Oh no, two gloves. But yeah, we used to get us down, and we used to spar in the front room. And 10 times out of 10, he used to give me a beating. And that first time that it ever happened, I thought, I'm gonna get him back. I want it. I fancy it. That's when I knew I had a love for boxing, because I just thought, I just wanted to turn it around. It took me a long time to do that, but there was many times in that front room where I come off second best. And there was one time, Gareth, just once, when I just let my hands go myself. He come down, my dad done the same thing, come down, I think, oh, here we go again, I've got to go for it again. Wasn't in a particularly good mood when I woke up to come down for the sparring this time. Let a shot go, hit his head hit the light switch, come back down, switch back on, lights gone off and on. And and it vexed my brother, and I was like, gloves down, right, that's it, done. And my boxing career began there.
So he was 4 years older than you. A lot of sports people say that they were the younger. Do you think that helped you come through then in lots of ways?
Massively.
Loads of rounds together?
Oh, listen, loads of rounds.
Not just on a Saturday night?
No, listen.
After the pub?
That's where it started. But then obviously it transferred over into the boxing gym, because my brother was a boxer. He had a great career himself, winning, national titles and turning professional with Cornelia Boza Edwards over in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And he had a great career over there, a stellar career over there. So, it was something that I was always competing against my brother, which sort of like give me the edge, I think, because I used to always come off second best because of that age gap. But I slowly started closing the gap as I was getting older, and I was getting that man strength and that maturity. But it was something like he inspired me to want to be better than him. So it always give me that extra little bit of edge, that bit that I wanted to get to the gym. I wanted to improve because I wanted to be better than my brother. And I think that was where it stemmed from.
It stemmed from there, but what age did you start training properly? Obviously, Dad and your uncle, big figures in training people in the boxing world. Your late great father, I must say that as well. What age did you start training properly?
I started training properly from when I was 7 years of age. Like in the gym, I was training 3 times a week.
7 years
of age. Listen to this for a story. You had to be 11 to box. On my 11th birthday, my dad took me as a spare to a working man's club, Ruislip Working Man's Club, as a spare on my birthday to see if he could get me matched up to have a fight. And I did get matched up with a kid called Seamus Kenny.
Who was probably about 14.
No, he was the same age as me, but he was about a foot taller than me.
Of course.
And my dad put us back to back, and the weight sort of went, because I was shorter and stumpier. And he went, yeah, this kid had 4 and lost them all. And he went, yeah, the fight goes, it's on. And it turned out to be a really hard fight, a fight that I'd won. But like that's where we was at. Like in my life was all about boxing from a really early age.
What was that feeling you got from it? You mentioned smacking your brother in the light bulb, but when you got into training and you're in the gym and dad and uncle are there and there's loads of people around, they're all looking at this little terror. You're not the Omen yet, but you probably are a little terror in there.
Yeah.
I can imagine you busting all the moves the whole time, and them going, this kid's going to be the next Sugar Ray Leonard. Look at him moving.
I was very aggressive.
What was the feeling that it instilled in you, that it imbued in you straight away?
I think it was always, I think what was my drive really and my driving force, was the wanting to please my dad and wanting to be the number one. Because my brother was the older of the two, he was the one that won national titles first, and he was the one that sort of like, I felt that had all the eyes on him, and that sort of inspired me because I just want to impress my dad, and I want to be the one that he talks about. I want to be the one that he looks at. And I think that was the driving force behind, my success.
Did he push you at all in boxing?
No, I think that it was a natural birth, because my uncle done it, my granddad done it, my father done it. So it went through the history of, the family. So from as young as I can remember, we was taken to the boxing gym. So it was a natural progression. It was a natural thing. We wasn't forced into it. It was just something that I grew up with. I grew up watching boxing. I grew up with, watching Marvin Hagler and all the greats, Hagler, Leonard Hearns, Duran. So it was one of those. It was a natural progression. I was always going to be a fighter.
So he trained you, but so you start secondary school. Are you preschool, before school in the mornings and after school training as well?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So I started with my trainer, Jackie Lee, who ended up training me all through my career. Started training me when I was 12 years of age. He used to pick me up from school, pick me up before school at 5:30. We used to get over Hampstead Heath, do the run, break the ice, jump in the pond, all that sort of stuff.
The Italian cafe up by
that's where we used
Parliament Hill?
Yeah, that's where we
used to go.
Two Italian
brothers,
exactly.
Where Bruno and all those guys trained and boxed as well.
Listen, I used to run one way around the boxers, and Frank Bruno used to run the other way, and you knew if you was late or whether you was early and what part you met at this certain point of the run, because he'd be crossing, we'd cross it. And I'd done that as a young kid. So I grew up with all these people, and inspiring to be them. But yeah, I'd done that, and my dad used to, my trainer, Jackie Lee, used to, take us over to Hampstead Heath, drop me off at school, and 9 times out of 10, he'd drop me at the school gates, and obviously I was so tired, I would walk past the school gates, cut across the field, back home, into bed, because my mum and dad obviously are at work. So that was sort of like life, yeah. I put all the eggs in one basket as a young kid.
Great stuff. The birth of the Omen. How old were you when you had that first amateur fight then?
I was 11. It was on my 11th birthday. It was like, you had to be 11 to box. I'd done numerous gym shows. So gym shows were like skills bouts, where you used to go and you used to box someone from end up, but you never had a winner or a loser. And I'd done tons of them because I just wanted to box, and I'd done them from a young age. So I had my first fight on my 11th birthday, like I say, in a smoky working men's club. You could smoke in the venues then. And I
remember the day. I remember them.
Exactly.
The York Hall full of smoke.
Oh, mate. Well, this was a Ruislip working man's club. It was a dinner show, so they had tables around the ring. You can imagine there's blokes sitting there smoking their cigars and puffing away. Big clouds of smoke are coming in the ring. And, I'm fighting my heart out with this kid from Burnt Oak. It's just one of those memories. I've still got the trophy as well, believe it or not. I've still got that trophy because that was my introduction into real-time boxing. And I think that's one that stays with you probably more than most.
You trained with some amazing fighters. Tell us about them. Notably one huge name as well.
Yeah, I think that, I've trained with numerous great fighters over the years, but Nazim Hamed was obviously a good and still a good friend of mine now. We boxed for England together when we were kids, and it was one of those where we used to stay at Crystal Palace. Do you remember the Crystal Palace Sports Centre? And that's where the England training camp used to be, with this big tower block with not particularly nice rooms in it. But we used to all room together, and me and Naz were similar weights, so we used to spar together. Me, Naz, and a kid called Dean Piffy, who was I remember training as well. Yeah. So we'd all room together because we were similar sort of weights, and that's where the relationship with Naz started. That was when we was sort of 13, 14 years of age.
Obviously, he's considered a modern great, certainly in British boxing. Did you know he was that good then?
Absolutely. Yeah, you always knew he was going to be a superstar. Naz was one of those kids that he wanted to do it his own way. He had his own style. The amateur style, they hated it, you know, all the clowning around. He used to jump over the top rope then as well. You know, he was one of those kids that was just like, you always knew that he had that superstar status around him. He had that something a little bit different, a little bit extra. Even when you were sparring him, you'd throw your shots and somehow he'd be behind you and just like, he never had the power then, but he was so elusive, it was incredible. He was like a magician.
Talk to us about the course of your amateur career then. You fought in the senior ABAs, you went to the Commonwealth Games. Talk to us about that. And how many fights did you end up having as an amateur?
Yeah, listen, I had 115 odd fights as an amateur, won about 102, 103, somewhere around there.
And lost?
Yeah.
I noticed you didn't say how many you lost.
Oh, no, lost about 13.
That's not bad in the amateurs, is it?
Very good, mate.
How many of those were robberies against you?
Oh, well,
There's always a few,
yeah, it's not for me to say that, but look, all I do know is I won schools, junior ABAs, senior ABAs, boxing the Commonwealth Games in 1994. So the story behind me turning professional so young, actually, was because in 1994, I boxed in the ABAs for the first time. I was an 18-year-old, like just turned senior, basically. And so I boxed in the ABAs. I wasn't even in the rankings because I'd only just turned senior. And I ended up winning the ABAs. So I was sort of like a dark horse that come out of nowhere. Commonwealth Games were that year in 1994. But it was the first time they introduced a computer scoring system into the amateur boxing system because of the Roy Jones robbery. Before that, in the Olympics. Yeah, because of that, you know, that was the big controversy surrounding that. So they wanted to change their systems and whatnot. And they introduced, in the Commonwealth Games, it was the first time they introduced this computer scoring system, which didn't suit my style because I was a terror. You remember me as an amateur, you remember me boxing. So come forward, loads of punches, combinations. And that wasn't the computer scoring because you have 5 judges and 3 of them have to press the button within a second of each other for the punch to score. So if you throw a 4-punch combination, they can't press the button 4 times.
Boxers changed their styles to almost single shots.
Absolutely,
didn't they?
yeah. And so, you know, winning the ABAs, they didn't have that in the ABAs. It was normal conventional scoring. But in the Commonwealth Games, they did have that. And I got to the final and I boxed a guy called Robbie Peden, who went on to have a successful career as well, become world featherweight champion. I boxed him in the final and I lost 2018. So I lost by 2 punches. And when you lose a gold medal for 2 punches, like, because you don't win the silver, you lose the gold. Silver's the worst one to have. And so I remember them doing the national anthems in the ring. And I was, like I say, 18 years of age at this stage. And I thought, I don't like this. I'm never going to be here because I should have won the gold. But the computer scoring system took that from me because I thought I won the fight. And, it was a good fight, a close fight. But I thought I'd done enough to win it. And I think most people around at that time did as well. And I lost the gold medal, so I thought I'm turning pro. And I made that decision at an early age. Looking back on it now, maybe I should have done the 96 Atlanta Olympics. The kids that I'd beaten previously had gone on and medalled in that. And my career may have even been different because, in hindsight, I think maybe I made the wrong decision turning pro so early, but it was the system that made me turn pro.
You turn pro. One of the big fights you're remembered for is Patrick Mullins. I want you to talk to us about that. Who came up with the Omen, by the way, the nickname?
Right, so my manager, a guy called Jess Harding, who's a good friend of mine as well. So, yeah, Jess started managing me. I was managed before that with a team co-pro. Mike Jacobs, that team fell apart, and so we all become free agents. Jess Harding, who was a friend of mine, close with Barry Hearn, had a good boxing career himself. He wanted to manage me. Big heavyweight, that's right. He wanted to manage me. I thought it was a natural thing to do because he had good contacts within the sport or whatever. And, he managed me, but he wanted to come up with a slogan, something that people would remember. It was the marketing genius, really, because the Omen was great. You could have the music and the build-up. It was something that it was catchy and something that people would remember. So he said to me, oh, yeah, come up with this name and we can create this, little devil in the ring, nice guy out of it. We can do the red eyes. We can do all of that stuff. So he had this great vision about marketing and selling you. Like, it was before time, really, way before time because of the build-ups and the ring walks, etc. So it was Jess's idea to come up with the Omen, the birth of the Omen, and it went from strength to strength, and it went at a rapid speed as well.
Yeah, exactly. You progress very nicely, and then tell us about this big fight with Patrick Mullins, your former sparring partner.
Yeah, well, So Patrick Mullins, when I was junior ABA champion when I was 15, Patrick Mullins was like 20, 22. He was senior ABA champion. So again, I'm sparring. And I used to always come off second best. Now, I had a history of sparring people that are a lot better than me, like my brother when I was a kid, Patrick Mullins when I was a junior. But I think that moulded me into the person that I become. That gave me the strength that I needed, that inner strength when, you know, when you get into those penultimate rounds like 9, 10, 11, 12, when it gets tough and it becomes a psychological battle. What happened to me when I was younger and fights like, or the sparring with Patrick Mullins, that moulded me into that person. So them beatings that I used to take from Patrick when I was a kid, effectively beat him in the real fight because we were there, we got into the fight and I was thinking, if he hits me with 2, I'm going to hit him with 3. If he hits me with 3, I'm going to hit him with 4. And when I'm tired, I've left no stone unturned. He couldn't have trained harder than me because I've done everything in my... So it's impossible. If I'm tired, he's got to be tired. And I had that sort of mindset. So when it got into those late rounds and it got tough, I could bite down on a gum shield and eventually I won the fight.
You've never changed because you're like that on comms now at rounds 9, 10, 11 and 12, and I speak from experience. Following beating Mullins, you go on to compete for the European Super Bantamweight title against Bulgarian Martin Kastev.
Yeah. So I'd beaten Patrick Mullins in my 10th fight. We won Fight of the Year, actually, 1997. It was a war. It went right down to the wire and I stopped him in the final seconds of the fight. It was a great fight, you know. And I then entered the European rankings at number 10 and Martin Krastev had just won the European title, knocking a guy out called...
That's what happens to
fighters. No, he knocked out a guy, Salim Medjikun.
Well done.
He knocked out Salim Medjikun. And Salim Medjikun was a world-ranked fighter at the time, and he flattened him in a round. So I'm on holiday in Tenerife. I've just got this victory over Patrick Mullins, so I'm living the life, lovely. All of a sudden, the phone rings. Answer the phone, it's Jess Harding, my manager. He went, mate, Spence, well, listen, things have really progressed. We've got a European title shot next if you fancy it. Come home, have a look at the fight. We've got this kid, Mike Kressiv. I think you can beat him. So I'm thinking, brilliant, lovely. Put the phone down, carry on partying, having a good time. Come home, sit down, watch the tape. And being young and maybe dumb sometimes, you know, I looked at it and I thought, yeah, I fancy this. It's a kid that had like sort of 32, 130, big knockout ratio. But I actually fancied it. I liked his style. Got the opportunity, took it. Quickest Briton ever to do it. It was in my 11th fight. Nazim Hamid held that title before that in his 12th fight. And I won. I knocked him out in 4 rounds. And my career really took off from there.
From that moment, you were successful, but the dark times came into your life. Spence, you go on to defend the European title 3 times. Then on the 4th defence, May the 2nd, 1998, at the Royal Albert Hall, that infamous fight with Sergei Devikov. Just talk us through it and what happened.
Yeah, so I won the European title when I was 21 years of age, like I say, at an early stage in my career. So like after beating Martin Krastev, I was number 5 in the world with all the governing bodies. So there's obviously no going back, you're only going forward, but I was still relatively inexperienced, still young. So there was time before I moved on and boxed for this world title. So I boxed a guy, Serge Poblan, in my first defence, then a guy, Vincenzo Belcastro, who boxed in the same habit before. So I was picking off all these names. Anyway, this guy comes up, Sergei Devikov, who's the mandatory contender. And back then, you had to defend the European title with the mandatory defence every 6 months. So I was just coming off a good win, actually, against a guy called Fabrice Beneshu, who was a 2-time world champion and was coming back into the sport. He'd been around a long time. I knocked him out in 4 rounds and I had to then go through this Sergei Devikov. But by this stage, I started struggling to make the weight because my body was growing. I'd just turned 23 years of age, so I'd held the European title now for some time, but your body's adjusting and tiring. So I was struggling to make weight and things weren't quite going right.
In what sense were you starving yourself? Was it just in camp?
Well, no.
What was the process of that struggle with weight? Were you living like a jockey? Were you not eating?
No, I was living the life. I always lived the life as a boxer, you know, and that was what it was. But it was just becoming harder. You know, not that it was like I was killing myself.
Well, you were pushing your body harder.
I was pushing my body harder. Like you
particularly
had
to make weight.
To make the weight, yeah. Particularly to make the weight. And
what did it entail doing? More running,
just more training overall. Like the day of the weighing. The big problem was the day of the weighing back then was at like 6 p.m.
Yeah.
The weigh-ins used to be where they do it now at 1 p.m. Back then it was 6 p.m. So like I would have to wake up on the morning of the weigh-in, let's say. So you've been drying out all night anyway. You wake up, you weigh like, let's go 8 stone 12. I've got to be 8 stone 10. So now I've got to skip 2 pounds off of fluid, which is very difficult to do, and then wait until
dangerous.
6, and then wait until 6 o'clock at night before you can eat or drink anything.
Yeah.
And like, that was, so it was becoming tougher, you know. And I felt that it was always going to be one of those, like, this one more fight, and then we're going to move up in weight. And I think the dream was always going to be that I was going to box Nazim Hamid, and there was talk of that happening
At
because
featherweight.
I was making such big noise at super bantamweight.
Yeah.
It was going to be, but it was like, let's win a world title at super bantam, then we'll move up and box straight away. We can box Nazim Hamid because you carry that little bit of weight then. And that was where it was going. So it was always going to be just this one more fight. Devikov was a guy that was in the way of me then. I was going to box the winner of, I think it was Wayne McCulloch, Eric Morales, because I was number 1 or 2 in the WBC.
Totally in the mix with all these big names.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I think, like, Manny Pacquiao was, like, number 8 in the world at the time or something. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So, like, you had Junior Jones around and, you know, Vianney Bungu, and there was loads of big names around. Kennedy McKinney was another one as well. So, yeah, it was just a passing by fight. I'd beaten people that had previously beaten this guy. But I think, effectively, when I look back on it now, weight really beat me, as opposed to the opponent.
Spiritually, emotionally, physically that night, you had what you loved and what defined you in many ways to being up to 23 from the age of 7 for 16 years. You dreamt of being a world champion. You had it all taken away from you.
Yeah.
What are your memories? I know that a lot of your memory has gone from that night. What are your memories? Obviously, you suffered a catastrophic brain hemorrhage that night. The fight was stopped in the 10th round. What do you remember of the night, of those incidents, and what was it like waking up to find out you may never box again?
It was bizarre because I'd only just turned 23 years of age, and this is something, by the way, that I lock in a box and I only very rarely talk about. You know, it's difficult to talk about this sort of stuff for me.
I'm sure.
Yeah, so 23, just turned 23 years of age. You were travelling to the Royal Albert Hall, which I remember. And I remember sort of getting in the dressing room, and then that's where it stops. I sort of vaguely remember coming up, so I had a crane, so I had this big entrance. It was Royal Albert Hall, boxing, Bertha boxing, back at the Royal Albert Hall. It hadn't been there for a few years, and they had me lifting me up on a crane, went up 150 foot. So we never actually practiced on the crane, but they showed me the ring walk, and I'd come out, and you'd go up on this crane, and then like it would come back down. I had the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra singing me in with the Omen music. It was all set out to be this huge night. And I sort of remember going up on this crane, and I was scared of heights. But I didn't really process it too much.
Yeah.
But like, because you think, I'm just going up on a little crane, but I didn't realise how high it was going to go. And so it went right up. So now I'm overlooking the whole of the Royal Albert Hall, and I've got the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra singing me, and I'm doing this. And as I'm doing this, I can feel the crane rock. So I put my hands down, and if you ever watch the video back, I'm just standing there like that. And
Frozen.
Just frozen, standing there like that.
Petrified.
And the lift goes down,
Yeah.
and I don't remember anything else.
Wow.
And I remember then waking up. So that was May the 2nd. I think I woke up on May the 12th or 13th or something like that. Anyway, 2 weeks later, I woke up. So I remember, imagine this, so you're coming down on a lift. I've got 5,000, 6,000 fans in it. The Albert Hall was packed.
Yeah.
It was my big night. It was the launch of the Omen, like going into the big time, because I was having this fight. The world title fight was already set out. It was going to happen. So the roadmap was there, and Sky were pushing me, all the media were pushing me, yourselves and everyone. I was going to be the next big thing in boxing. Come down, bam, lights go out. I wake up, I'm looking around, and I'm thinking, what's going on here? And I think, wow, I must have been knocked out. And at this time, I've got some like breathing apparatus in my mouth, and you know, it was all a bit crazy.
You're in a hospital
I was
bed.
in a hospital bed.
Yeah.
I'd been in a coma, an induced coma for 2 weeks. And yeah, I had 98 staples in the right side of my head. They sealed a blood clot on the right side of my brain, so I had a bleed on the brain, basically. Yeah, and I remember waking up and I'm thinking, wow. So all of a sudden I've got the doctor putting a ballpoint pen in my hand, in my hand, on my foot. And I've got this thing on my mouth, and I'm thinking, what is going on here? What are they doing? I'm thinking, wow, I must have been knocked out. I thought, am I still at the Albert Hall? Like, all these things, it was weird. Like, and I've just lost 2 weeks of my life. So anyway, I ended up with this thing coming out my mouth and them talking to me, and then the doctor says to me, Spencer, do you know who this is? And I'm, my dad. And they're like, do you know who that is? So I'm just nodding, and they go, do you know who that is? So it's my dad, and it's my mum, it's my brother, and I'm thinking, this is really weird, man. Like, wow. So they said, don't worry, look, you've had an accident, but it's going to be fine. And I'm thinking, I'm sure I was fighting though. I was going to a fight. It was like, so I'm trying to put it all together, and I'm thinking, at the time, obviously I'm completely spaced out. So I'm thinking, I thought I was having a bad dream or something. I thought it was one of them nightmares. I'm thinking, this can't be real. Is this, like, what is going on here? I'm sort of, are you awake? What's going on? It was just so weird. Anyway, this went on for 2 or 3 days of them saying to me, Spence, don't worry. And I thought, I must have been knocked out. This is bad, man. I'm going to be out for a year or so.
You're talking at this point? Or?
Yeah, just barely talking. Like, so, like, everything was slow. Like, reactions were slow. Everything was slow. But I'm in my head going, wow, like, I must have been knocked out. I'm going to be out for at least a year. No one had told me the extent of the injury. So then I had a catheter in at the time. They took the catheter out, and it was all this horrible stuff. And then the day comes, and they say, look, Spence, we're going to get you up today and start walking. And I thought, oh, great. Yeah, all right, brilliant. So they get me up, and they put me on a Zimmer frame. And as I get up on a Zimmer frame, I think my legs are not even there, and I'm here. Wow. And I'm just like, I've got no legs. And I'm going, and they're going, right, lift your right leg. And I'm going, I can't move my leg. And then, so I'm doing this, and this is where it was. It was like this. I've just got these like small steps, and it was like bizarre. I'm thinking, I can't even walk. What is going on here?
So you're learning to walk again and talk again.
And I still don't know what's happened, because the last memory is travelling to the Royal Albert Hall. So I'm trying to, but no one's telling me, because the position that I was in, they go, we don't want to traumatise him any more than he already is. So anyway, at this point, I've got half my hair shaved off. My hair's like it is now. Half of it's shaved off. I've got 98 staples going around here. My head's swollen out like that. It was like, you know, it was grossly swollen.
When was the first time you saw that then? Was it going...
That's where I'm going to take you to. So I get on this Zimmer frame. This is when they're taking the catheter out. I get in there, do these tiny few steps, go back and think, man, I've got some serious work to do here to get myself back to where I need to be. Again. Yeah, absolutely. I'm still thinking that. Yeah. And then I go, right, I need to go to the toilet. I need to go to the toilet. All right, Spence. So I forget who was with me then. It might have been my dad or someone. They get me on this Zimmer frame. They walk me to the toilet. And in the toilet was obviously a big mirror. And I go like that. And so I get in there and I look up. No one's even told me that I've got 98 staples made at this stage, because they didn't want to. I look up and I'm like, this is like serious. Like, then I thought, I just want to look normal again. Boxing become then secondary. Then I recognised the extent of the injury and what a journey I had in front of me and how tough that journey was going to be. Like, I'm just turned 23 and I've got the whole world in front of me, my whole life in front of me, and boxing had gone.
How, as that dawns on you, as the realisation that you will have been told you're never going to box again, could you accept that straight away, and how did you cope with it, first of all?
No, I couldn't accept it at all, if I'm totally honest. Like, and it was, whilst I was in the hospital, I was really struggling with that and speaking to different people on the wards and couldn't get any sense out of anyone. Like, I was on the ward, at first I was on the ward with other people that had head injuries as well. Spoke to one guy and he's like, he wasn't making sense in what he was saying, and it was just freaking me out, and I just thought, I need to get out of this place. It's like a madhouse, I've got to get out of here. Threw my things, just threw my things down. I was like, right, that's it. Started getting dressed. I was like, I'm out of here. And all the doctors and everything were going mad. All of a sudden, Jess Harding comes walking down Jess Harding was a heavyweight, as you know, Jess. He was a big guy, and he comes walking down the corridor of the ward, and he says to me, Spence, what's going on? I went, Jess, I'm out of here. I've got to go. This place is driving me mad. Like, it was that acceptance of not being out of box again, all those emotions going on. And I actually discharged myself from the hospital. And this was like 3 days after I'd come out of the coma. And Jess was like, don't worry, I'll look after him. And he took me out, and he took me to a Chinese. He took me to a Chinese in Soho, in Chinatown. So I went to Chinatown, we put me in a cab, we go to Chinatown. At that time, there was no social media. All the cars were being, everyone was going mad. And I went, I want to go in that Chinese there. And he said, all right, come on, look, don't worry, I'm going to look after you. We'll take you in. I chose a Chinese that had stairs like that at the beginning of him. So he's freaking out, right? We're in this, so I'm walking down the stairs. He's like, he's holding me and getting me down the stairs. Anyway, we had this Chinese. I went back up, long story short, and then I accepted that I was okay. Like it defused me a little bit, and I went back to the hospital and served the rest of the time in the hospital that I needed.
But as time goes on, outside the sports, how was your personal life affected? How are family and friends with you? Are you constantly dealing emotionally? People would have talked about it as mental health today, what you would have gone through. Obviously, you're going through physical health. But what did you go through physically and mentally, psychologically from that period? We know you make a resurgence, but what did you go through maybe for the first 6 months, 9 months, a year, all those things? You're learning to process things again. But what were you feeling inside with your dreams taken away in that sense?
Well, you're right. There was no mental health wasn't a thing then. It wasn't, I think that people sort of flipped everything to me and saying, Spence, look at Michael Watson and how medical science has improved so much that you've come out and made this recovery.
Did you feel like a medical miracle like him?
No, I felt bitter and twisted then.
There you go.
I do now. Now I wake up on May the 2nd of every year, I celebrate it. Whereas May the 2nd, when we're talking about in those early years, were dark times for me, horrible times for me, because I couldn't deal with it. I was a young kid.
It was like dealing with a death almost.
And no one knew what mental health was, so I had no one to talk to. Everyone's saying to me, oh, mate, what a recovery you made. I went, but inside's dead. The shell looks great, and, I've made this recovery, but inside is gone, dead. And so it was like this, I was like, to the outside world, everyone's thinking, oh, this kid's doing great, but inside, inside I was completely messed up. And I was living a dark life, a horrible life. A lot of partying, lot of drinking, a lot of going out.
Did you ever think of taking your own life in that period?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, because I thought, what's it for? What's it all about? Wow. What's the point of it? Because boxing was my life. And it was a tough time.
It's even hard now. I mean, I've known you all these years. I've known you 35 years. It's 26 years ago. 27 years this year. And it's still... I can feel it now. We're brothers. Yeah. In the sense of working together all the time. It's hurting you right now to think about it, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough.
Let's take a moment just to celebrate that you are here, that you had a great career, that we celebrate over and over again, that you did survive it, that your physicality, your conditioning, what you are physically, I always joke about it with you. You're like the ever-ready bunny. Your battery never goes down. And you haven't changed. You got it back.
I think that's because I now recognise that I was given a second shot at life and living a full life, a full healthy life. And now, I say, I recognise it as now a celebration, whereas back then I was a young kid that couldn't deal with it and couldn't speak to anyone about it, so my emotions were all over the place. And it was something that I had to go through myself, and those dark times I had to go through myself and get myself out of those dark times. And that was character building. It made me the person I am today. And I think for those experiences, it's made me appreciate life, and I live life to the full, and that's why I've got so much energy, because I live life and I still think like a boxer, because that's the last thing I know. It weren't like the fight had ever been knocked out on me. I was a kid that was just on the rise and just on the verge of doing really big things within the sport, and then I wake up and it's all gone, but my mind's still exactly the same.
Michael, I feel emotional talking about it with you as well today, actually. Michael Watson is a very good friend of both of ours. You mentioned him earlier. He went through it and it changed that golden hour, as they call it, where they anaesthetise fighters when there is damage. They put you into a passive state. Have you been able to help anyone else through these kind of things because it happened to you?
Yeah, I spoke to Jerome Wilson, who was a kid that had the similar injury. So spoke to him about that, his tough times. I helped him through those times. And Kieran Farrell as well. I got Kieran Farrell back into boxing after his injury against Anthony Corolla.
Who now works with Daniel Dubois.
That's right. Exactly. So, I helped and guided those through those times. But, it's a great story about Michael Watson, actually, because Michael Watson become my inspiration, and he's like a soulmate, like a brother to me. Me and Michael, we lived a very close life, but I looked for him for inspiration when I was going through these dark times, and he helped me through them. And I said to Michael about this when I was doing a show with him once. I said to him, Michael, how did you get through that? When we saw you getting wheeled out on, like at Arsenal football ground, and you're getting wheeled out and you were sort of like lifeless. There was nothing there. He said, well, when I was lifeless, Muhammad Ali come to visit him in a hospital. And he said, and he was my hero. And he said, my inspiration, and he said, Muhammad Ali was speaking to me, and he said, I couldn't react, but my mind knew what was going on. And he said, and that gave me the strength and the courage and everything and
connection
that I needed to pull myself through.
All those things, yeah.
So I was like, well, Michael, you're my Muhammad Ali because you've done that for me. You give me the strength and the power and the will, because I'm looking at you going, you know, if he can do it, if he could take himself from where he was and get himself to where he is now, I can do the same.
It's funny.
And it was, yeah. So
he was incredibly inspirational.
Yeah.
I totally get it. And you are for many people now. I remember walking the marathon with him in 2003.
I finished the last mile.
You did?
Yeah,
6.5 days it took.
Yeah, that's right.
I was ghosting his columns at the time in the national
me and Chris
newspapers. What a story, because he was a medical miracle. Peter Hamlin, the consultant neurosurgeon that operated on him. Do you feel like a medical miracle?
Absolutely. I think, you know, I don't know what it is. I'm not a great believer in God, but I definitely believe that somebody up there was with me that day, and I was put back here for a purpose, for a reason. And I think that, you know, I hope that what I'm doing now within the sport, and you know how I feel about people taking drugs within the sport and everything else, and I know how the dangers of this sport, and that's why I'm so passionate about things like that. You know, I think that I'm put back here and I'm doing good for the sport, and I'm helping young fighters come through, and I'm passing on my experiences. And so, yeah, I hope that I'm doing a good job at doing what I'm doing right now. But Michael was the inspiration for me, really, yeah.
How did your injury change the sport? British boxing's known for its world-class medical staff.
Yeah.
Do you think it's had a lasting impact on the medical side of boxing in this country?
Absolutely. So I think Michael Watson was the story that everybody knew and recognised, and you know the medical procedures weren't at ringside that should have been there maybe for Michael at that time, because no one knew what it exactly was. And you know, he got taken to hospital, and it was like you said, the golden hour. You know, is critical when you know you need to be under the knife, you need to be operated on within that golden hour to have any sort of chance. Michael wasn't, because he was taken to one hospital that couldn't deal with, didn't know what it was, and then he was taken to another hospital, so the procedures weren't in place. And I think through what happened to Michael, effectively saved my life.
Well, that's why they're
the British Boxing Board of Control are the most stringent boxing board in the world. Whatever people want to say about the British Boxing Board of Control, they move with the times, and they're always looking to improve and do better things. And I think that that's what they done through what happened to Michael. The medical procedures were different. And just to give you a quick story about that, like the guy that was working in my corner was a guy called Eddie Carter, who used to do my cuts. Eddie Carter used to, you know, keep researching all this stuff in case anything ever went wrong or whatever else. The anaesthetists were at ringside that weren't there when Michael, you know, had his injury. We had an anaesthetist at ringside. Eddie saw me going in and out of consciousness and start fitting, and he said, put a line in him, sedate him in the ring, and that will stop any swelling on the brain and any damage. We can get him to the hospital. They put a line in me, sedated me in the ring, carried me out, and they had me under the knife within the hour, hence why I made a full recovery.
It pacifies the body, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
It lets it go into almost like a sleep mode. Just before we move on, you were working in Poland last year when you ran into one of the doctors who was working on the event who'd helped to save you that night.
I did. It was May 2024. Rosansky versus Okoli. It was for the Bridgerweight World title, WBC World title. And we were out there, and I was out there with the boys, actually, Ed and Romario. We were all having a coffee. And the guy come up to me, he says, Spencer, do you remember me? I'm looking at him, I think, looks familiar, but do I remember him? I mean, there's a lot going on in my life right then. I was like, I don't know if I remember you. Like, I thought he was one of the judges of one of my fights because he was a European guy. And he said to me, no, I was, you know, part of the team. I was an inspector there the night that it happened to you, so I was a big part of what went on and all that. So anyway, we had this lovely moment, and we hugged and we embraced, and it's like boxing's that beautiful, close-knit family world, isn't it? Like when you have certain moments and, you know, certain tragedies and crises that happen in boxing, that, you know, we all sort of come together. And it was like, yeah, I embraced with him for that moment. It was beautiful. It was really nice. How weird is that? Like 26, 27 years on, I hadn't seen him, and we meet in a crazy little place in Poland.
I don't know if before your injury you'd thought about a career in broadcasting, but only 3 months after the injury or the catastrophic injury and change to your life, you're given an opportunity to do broadcasting.
Yeah. the late, great Vic Wakeling, who was the head of Sky Sports at the time. I wrote to Vic. We didn't have social media and stuff back in those days. You know, it was a case of me writing a letter to him saying...
And hand delivery?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Vic, please give me the opportunity. Absolutely. Yeah, so Vic, please give me the opportunity, you know, to stay with... I want to stay with involved in the sport. I want to stay... I feel like I've got a lot to give. They knew that I had a big personality. Yeah. They were building me up anyway. And I thought, what else am I going to do with my life? You know, I left school when I was 15. Didn't go to school much before when I was 15 because my trainer was dropping me off at school and I was so tired I was going home to sleep before going back to training again. So my life was boxing, but that's all I knew, and I was a good talker. So I asked him for the opportunity. He gifted me that opportunity and said, "Look, I think you're a great advert for the sport because of the way that you've come back. It's inspirational." August the 8th, 1998, just a couple of months, as you say, after my injury, I'm up in Scarborough. Like doing punditry on Patrick Mullins versus Simon Ramoni for the World IBO World title. And I was looking at it thinking, I don't like this. I'm not sure that I even like this.
Didn't like it?
Well, I was still thinking like a fighter.
You wanted to be in there? I
was still thinking like a fighter. I'm thinking, I might be able to come back still here. I'm looking at these kids going, well, I beat him. I know I'm going to beat him. And now they're fighting for these titles. But it was all really, really strange times for me, but I was so grateful that I was gifted that opportunity, and that was back in 1998, and we're now 2025, and I'm doing the same thing.
Did that trigger having to cope with what was coming up in your life? Yeah.
I think that was the dark times in my life. I think what I was going through there, because you're seeing me on screen, you're going, wow, look at this kid, what an inspiration.
Have you watched your broadcast
how he's come back.
Have you watched your broadcast?
No, I've never watched a broadcast.
Could you?
Do you know the worst broadcast that I was asked to do? And this is bizarre, man, and I'm going to give you a great story on this. So after I'd done that Patrick Mullins one, then Sergei Devikov was boxing Michael Brody. He was defending his title against Michael Brody. And Chris Brown, who was the head of Sky at the time, said, Spence, we want you to do the fight. It's only a few months after I've just been injured. So this kid's never even been in touch with me since the injury. He never got in touch to see how I was or whatever. So I had all those bitter things going on as well. And he says, and I said, all right, yeah, I'll do it because I want the work. I need the work. So I do it. So now I'm going, but I don't know who Sergei Devikov is because I don't remember him. So I've got to rewatch the fight. It's insane.
Wow.
So I put the fight on and I sit in front of the telly. And I sat there and cried from the beginning to the end because I knew that I was watching the end of my career. And it was the worst thing that I ever had to do, but I had to do it because I didn't know who this kid was. And so I sat there and watched it, and it was horrible, man. And then so I had to then do that, and they should never have asked me to do that commentary, by the way, on that, because it was too raw, too emotion. You know, the emotions were too raw then. And I was asked to do it, and anyway, I'd done it.
That's still
and I got
raw
through
now.
it.
That's what's amazing.
Yeah.
Today I've seen you 2 or 3 times well up because it's, like say, it's in a box.
It's because, and that's what I said to you, I keep it in a box because I don't want it to go away. It's part of my life and it's part of who I am today. But that box, when I open it, and you opened it a bit today, and when it opens, it's just full of emotions. Is
that the only time you ever watched that fight?
Yeah.
The late 90s and the noughties, star-studded. Lennox Lewis, Prince Naseem, Manny Pacquiao, Floyd Mayweather, the rise of Ricky Hatton and Joe Calzaghe. How much pleasure did you eventually get when you got into the broadcasting?
I loved it. It was like a substitute to me. It was the next best thing. You know, it was like giving me that something to take that pain away. Like, had I not been involved in broadcasting, I don't know where my life would have aspired to. Like, it would have spiraled out of control. It would have been. It could have been terrible. But boxing again was my saviour there. Like being involved on this side of the ropes, doing what I was doing there was like the substitute for me really boxing. So look, I had pleasure. You know, Naseem Hamid, who I grew up with and is a great friend now. Lennox Lewis, I used to go round and play snooker at his house.
You beat him at snooker, apparently,
I did with his brother Dennis. And so, you know, they all become good friends of mine. Ricky Hatton, Joe Calzaghe, they were all good because we were all brought up in that same sort of era. So working on those shows with them was like a great substitute, and it helped me through some really, really dark times.
One of the things I've noticed, you and I have worked together for a long time now, probably over 10 years, but we've known each other 30 years plus, is I notice the appreciation as time goes on from all those boxers towards you when we're around them, it's an inherently dangerous sport. I noticed the brotherhood of them towards you, the fact that we're all celebrating you're still with us.
Yeah.
And that must be a big thing with all those names as well.
Oh, absolutely. You know, they were all around at that time, so they all knew what I'd been through, and they were all very supportive. Yeah, of course, because I was one of them.
It could happen to anyone, couldn't it?
Boxing's one big family,
and it could happen to
anyone. And that's the dangers of the sport. And this is why I pipe on so much about, you know, people taking drugs within the sport and people doing things, and that's why I get so emotional about it, because I nearly died doing it. I know the dangers of it, like everyone else does. But the reality is, you never think it's going to happen to you. And when it does happen to you, trust me, that roller coaster of a ride, the journey and trying to get back to where you were. I mean, the guy that I am now, that was not plain sailing. That was a roller coaster, man. And that was a lot of emotions. And some of them were very, very dark ones. And that created the person I am today.
There's not a month goes by when you and I are working together then that this doesn't come up, that I celebrate you, or there's a feeling when you see someone in trouble. When we were there, for example, with Fabio Wardley and Fraser Clarke in the second fight, when Fraser looked damaged, there's an intake. I didn't remember it as one of the knockouts of the year in 2024 because you don't want to remember some things that you don't want to glorify. It crosses over, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Boxing is theatrical, it's incredible, it's so thrilling, but there's a line, isn't there? And we have that line in broadcasting as well, don't we?
Absolutely.
Where you're not going to glorify, you might glorify a knockout, but you're not going to glorify someone lying there for too long.
No, the beautiful brutality, isn't it, of the sport, where everyone wants to see the knockout and everyone wants to see that showreel knockout, that devastating knockout. And then when it happens, you've got that moment where you're just looking, going, come on then, get up. Then make sure he's all right. So it's weird, the emotions that you get, because everyone wants to see that. The casual boxing fan wants to see that. And then it happens, and then you're praying that everything's all right. It's a bizarre sport.
How does it feel now? You've been an observer and a commentator and an analyst on sports and a broadcaster on sport longer than you boxed. How does that resonate with you now?
It's crazy. I'm like nearly 50 years of age now. I've done that, so over half my life I've been broadcasting. And when I was boxing, it just felt like forever, you know, going through that whole process of the juniors and the seniors and Commonwealth Games, professional boxing. It just seemed like forever. But when I look back on it now, I go, it was such a short time. But that moulded me and set me on the path to doing what I'm doing today. And listen, I'm proud of what I've done. I'm proud, you know. Long may it continue. I've made some great friends, yourself included, within this sport, in the broadcasting. And we have great fun. We have some great times. We've had some great times.
We will have more great times. Well, thank you, Spencer. Your life in boxing is so extraordinary, so fascinating. Thank you for being so open and honest and deep with us today. You've been watching My Life in Boxing with me, Gareth Davies, and him, Spencer the Omen Oliver. We'll see you next time.